Hey everybody, I hope you are doing really well. I'm Afefe with Touch by Tarot and Beyond. I want to check in here with you all on a few things on the political front today. As usual, as always, there is no shortage of, of events, both domestically here in America and abroad globally. But today we're going to go with Donald Trump. Of course, that we could be here all day on that alone, right? Always try to start out with a smile when we're dealing with such difficult stuff. But I know all of you saw the piece about the articles and coverage about DJT falling asleep apparently at his while he was in court yesterday during the jury selection, or the beginning of the jury selection. You all know as well as I do, this is going to be a very long and drawn out process. I think for so many, people who've been waiting for this thing, like, get it going already. And we know more than likely this will be the only trial that goes forth in 2024. It's not Alvin Bragg's trial. The immunity thing, let's see what the Supreme Court does. They're gonna hear arguments about that on the 25th of April, render a decision apparently by the time they close out their session for this year in late June. We'll see what happens. What was up with the Clarence Thomas just disappearing off of the face of the earth yesterday, and not, no excuse, no coverage, no nothing. But then he shows back up today as the court is ready to hear these arguments on obstruction. I was shocked. I'd love to hear how you all are feeling about it. And it's like, even, I feel silly at this point for saying I'm shocked to hear anything relating to Trump and the Jan 6ers, etc. It's like, why be surprised at this point? But so they are reviewing this law. Supreme Court's going to review this law about whether the obstruction charge can be used legitimately, whether it's constitutional to use that charge, which was brought by many of the hundreds of people who have been prosecuted, and many of those who have actually been sentenced to prison primarily based on the obstruction charge. From what I understand, there was seditious conspiracy and some other charges that could have been brought, but the obstruction seemed to be the most cut and dry and easiest to prosecute and bring up as a claim in court. So there are numbers of these Jan 6 rioters who in fact are behind bars, and it is primarily owing to this obstruction charge. Now, it's been taken up by the Supreme Court. Dun 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 dun. No surprise, right? I'm gonna go to Spirit. I have a hit within myself. I'm gonna ask for confirmation. I think that the Supreme Court, who is becoming slowly but surely a part of the MAGAverse, is going to strike that down, and uphold the idea that these were not obstructors, that the Jan 6 rioters and we have the documentaries, we have the photographs, we have the YouTube clips, we have so much proof to speak otherwise, that in fact that is what they were doing. They were obstructing the Congress's ability to certify the election. All right, who am I? But I do think, and it's interesting again, that whatever was going on with Clarence Thomas, who has refused to recuse himself, because we know, again, proof positive, we are not guessing here, that Jenny Thomas was involved in a lot of what happened on January 6th. Keep it moving, right? Keep it pushing, Fefe, right? All of us, we know this. But lo and behold, so the question was raised, hey, buddy, this is your wife. Clearly, we know that she was involved and she was a supporter of what was happening there. She was behind the scenes, unless she was in disguise for entertainment purposes only. Unless she was in disguise somewhere, in the throngs on Jan 6, 2021. But he said, no, I'm not going anywhere. I am going to go ahead and participate in this. I have a sneaky suspicion, you all, that they're gonna kick it out. But what is really, I was like, boom, my eyes, wide open, because apparently there are people who, Jan 6 rioters who were convicted and given prison term sentencing in behind bars, who have already been released pending this Supreme Court decision on the obstruction issue, right? Tell me in any universe where that makes sense, where other people who may have been convicted of serious charges enough to warrant being sentenced to prison. Oh, well, while we're reviewing this, you go ahead and go home, have a steak dinner, do your thing. All right, I want to see, is the Supreme Court in fact going to kick out the justice law, the obstruction? Might as well say justice obstruction. The constitutionality of the obstruction. We have the Queen of Swords, that's somebody dissenting. Might be Sotomayor. Of course, Ketanji Jackson perhaps. But there's going to be some dissension. It will come from the feminine ranks of the Supreme Court. But there's the Knight of Pentacles pushing it forward, moving it forward, and trying to solidify why that should not be, why that obstruction issue. And there's the Emperor. That's their opinion, because again, whether I'm saying it tongue in cheek or if it's actually becoming so, the Supreme Court has demonstrated time and time again that they are in fact aligned with the MAGAverse, period. So I think the Emperor is who, 45 who wants to become 47. May it not be so, right? So yes, prepare ourselves. They're going to strike it down. But then one thing that I read was that some of the federal judges who were in charge of these sentences have already said, okay, be that as it may, that does not mean the bottom will drop out in terms of meting out justice and punishment for those who participated in those riots on Jan 6, because there were other charges. There were multiple charges. And one judge even said, I think I wrote his name down, because I was like, let me give him a nod. I'm sorry, y'all, maybe I didn't. But I remember he was in Iowa. And he said, basically, if that were going to be the case, then rather than, how when they issue a sentence, they'll look at the sum total of the charges, and sometimes you can serve a sentence concurrently. So instead of having charges and time served back to back to back, it's sort of condensed, and it's a concurrent sentence. And there was one judge out of Iowa federal judge who said, listen, if that's the case and if that's what they want to do, it's not the end of it's not the sum total of what is possible and what we can still do in terms of sentencing, that in fact some of the misdemeanor charges could then be, instead of concurrent sentences, could be consecutive sentences. So there's a way to still, do sentencing in a way that if obstruction is not a part of it, then some of these other charges would be held more at the maximum of what, the maximum sentencing that's applicable to those charges. And so one way or another, because I think, one thing that I felt in spirit with the guides were talking to me about is like, look, the last thing we need right now is we look at Jan 6, 2025, right? The last thing we need is for, some of the messaging that went behind these sentences for these rioters was, hey, guess what? You will be found, you will be prosecuted, and you will go to jail, right? You will go to prison. And so the idea now to plant that seed in the MAGAverse, hey, guess what? Because we know DJT has already said to them, don't you worry about a thing. I get back in office, going to issue a proclamation on the first day. Y'all can all go home and we'll call it a day. Sorry for the inconvenience, right? And I don't think that's going to happen. This federal judge in Iowa, and I'm sure many others, are already thinking, okay, should this become a possibility? And Spirit is saying that it looks like it will. The Supreme Court is going to, I just pulled the moon. This is what is being highlighted and what is highlighted now, and what is, there's a lot. This was in motion, you all, for a very long time. From the, thank you, Spirit. From the moment these cases, the Jan 6 rioters were beginning to be seriously prosecuted and these sentences started to get handed down, that's when all of this went into effect. And it went into effect at the highest levels. I'm feeling there were conversations, of course, let's go back to old girl Jenny, sitting there with Clarence over their wine and dinner nights or whatever. There were already plans in place. Okay, there were so many people who, at our behest, carried out our desires, and we've got to find a way to send that messaging out there that it is okay, right? It's okay. Now, there are also states that are, and I'll do a deeper dive on this in a future taping, but I also understand that in anticipation of, post-election issues, there are already laws that are being put on the books, anti-protest laws. A lot of those got started even going back to, I became aware of them during the, especially, certain states that were very vocal, and lots of things that happened behind the George Floyd murders, right? That was, and that was at the height of COVID 2020, and the United States as well, other communities around the world went ballistic, taking it to the streets about police brutality, etc. But that is also a time when there was a lot of anti-protest laws that were starting to get put on the books, or at least debated, because they want to tamp that down. They don't want people to have these avenues available to them, or certainly not when it suits, when it is against their principles, meaning these extremists, the far right extremists. So be prepared for that. Supreme Court's going to follow its orders from who. They're going to, there will be some dissension. I saw that woman or women. So there will, of course, be dissension, but I think there's going to be a majority that takes that issue out. So, but we'll see what happens, whether those who have already been released. I understand there's several hundred who have already, Jan 6 rioters, who've already been sentenced, and I think most of whom, if not all, are in fact behind bars. I understand that based on this application of the law, or the decisions that are being made in certain districts, that only about 10 of them have actually already been released pending this decision from the Supreme Court around obstruction. So we'll see what happens. Will they get sent back? Will they have to get, is there some other way to even retry them? I don't know, but I think that's going to be really important for us to keep our eyes on, not just in terms, again, of because of the sentencing and the justice being brought against those who participated in Jan 6 2021, but keeping our eye on the future. We're only so many months away from January 2025, and so we need to pay close attention to that. The other thing I wanted to talk to you all about today, and I have to thank you. I love doing these readings because so many of you are knowledgeable, and we share information. This is a great platform to share information, and we have to be careful about what we're absorbing. Always do your homework. That's one reason why I'm forever, not just relying on what I see on mainstream media, but all of us, we have our tools and our resources. So I did a taping recently on a topic, and someone said, well, it's about Project 25. I did, maybe I was late to the party. I didn't know what Project 2025 was. So I went and did my research. Thank you for that. I don't remember your name. I wish I'd written it down, but you know who you are if you see this video. Thank you for that. So Project 2025, 1,000-page manifesto from the Heritage Foundation with all of these principles around, what life should be like, and all of these far right, extremely Christian nationalist ideas around the roles of family, of course, stripping away all of the rights, gender affirming care. I read the latest list of states that have actually enacted laws against gender affirming care. There are attorneys who have raised case, or prosecutors who are now in certain districts in the red states especially, but others as well, who are demanding to see records, medical records from people who have sought that care on some other pretext. It's almost like they can't do it in terms of invasion of privacy, because of course the medical providers would have to say, no, we've taken an oath, we can't give you this. So they're trying to find loopholes in ways to get this information anyway, and it's very, very damaging. I mean, all of it is meant to instill fear, and so that people, we've already seen articles about women who are self-administering the abortion drugs, or terminating pregnancy, and the fear that you do this and you're sitting in a house by yourself or with a friend or whatever, as opposed to being in a facility where you can get adequate care. Going back to Project 2025, that's what it's all about. It's the idea of instilling fear, but it's also about retraining the brain, among this MAGAverse, to see their quest as not just, it's not even about politics, you all, for so many of them. Spirit is saying this is about believing in this sort of holy mission. And this is where Trump has done tremendous damage, but also furthered his cause, because he's tapped into this whole religious movement in recent months, and especially since Mike Johnson took over. He's been going hard at that. I am the one being persecuted on behalf of all of you. This whole these inferences to Jesus. But I wanted to talk to you also about, Spirit said, hypomania. Psychiatrists, and there are books that have been written about this, that Trump's hypomania, this not just being manic, but that it is prompted by levels, it can be exacerbated by high levels of stress, of course, and senses of superiority and narcissism and all these things that we know about him. But I also am getting an impression, and want to look at, this is spreading. I almost saw it, Spirit showed it to me almost like a virus, where the hypomania that he possesses is sort of spreading. I saw that in recent rallies that he's done, Rome, Georgia, Ohio, other places, people are lining up, staying. And there was one, Rome, Georgia, I think it was, they slept inside of a parking garage overnight. And there was one woman who was sitting there, the reporter, and bless their hearts. One of the things that media is doing right now, of course, is they're sending reporters out to cover these MAGA rallies. Better them than me. But this is how we're sort of getting a bird's eye view into not just what he's saying, but what is the vibe? What are the conversations? What is it that's causing this hype? Because the crowds are growing. If you see it, many of the crowds in these cities are truly growing. The throngs are coming out. They're getting, ginned up. They're juiced up. And I feel like it's this hypomanic energy that he possesses. Spirit just kept giving it to me like a virus, like it's just spreading. But it is because they see it as their duty to God. They see it as not just they like Trump and but he's reflecting principles, going back to this Project 2025, that they see as the necessity for them to be obedient to their faith. This virus is going to need to be addressed. And I've got the Knight of Swords. Conversations are going to be had. I feel like there are church leaders. That's what I'm getting. There are church leaders who are going to begin to speak more vocally and get more active to counteract that far right Project 2025-esque mentality that is really brainwashing people. There's temperance. Thank you so much, Spirit. That's healing. You see that angel there, many times in depictions of the temperance card in major arcana, it is angelic, ruled by Sagittarius, so it deals with philosophy and religion, but there's also it's ruled by Jupiter, so there's growth, expansion. This growth and expansion of this, I'm calling it a virus. That's how they gave it to me. This hypomania, this willingness to sit out in the cold for 12, 16 hours to listen to this what is becoming more and more actually incoherent. If you actually watch any clips in depth of what he's talking about, Trump, on the campaign trail. And sitting out there, with a 6-year-old, and that was just the one instance that the reporter talked about in the article. Imagine how many kids, how many teenagers, how many people, young people, this is going to be a part of their indoctrination. The 10 of Cups. People see, it's interesting. A lot of what is happening right now, you all, Spirit, the guides are being really clear. It's not even about him. He's the framework. He's the landing pad for them to be able to get together and point to and say, yes, that's how I feel. That rings true for me. That America does need to be saved. That we've gone off course. That we are not exercising the principles that we see in this Project 2025, which is about, families can only look one way between a woman and a man. That our faith, that government is, to the extent that it exists and is in place, it should in fact operate to some extent to uphold holy principles of a godly life. That the idea of life and liberty is more around a good life. I did write this down: a good life versus a holy life. That to have a good life means you should be living a quote unquote holy life. The holy life then would be an extension of what people like the Project 2025 says. You want to know what holy life is? We've got it all mapped out for you. Take that and run with it. Not that the average Joe is going to sit, or family's going to sit and church going family's going to sit and read some 1,000-page document, but the principles, and if they have people who are alluding to those principles, then they get behind that. But I think, you all, there is something coming. 7 of Pentacles. There's something coming. These people are going to need to be deprogrammed and to understand that those who, whether they count themselves as liberals, independents, but those who are not buying into this far right, extremism, are not the enemy. There is something that is coming, and I think it's going to have to come from not government, not totally. I think there's something. It just feels like something is simmering beneath, where people in positions of leadership in the faith community around the country, the hangman, with the energy of the 7 of Pentacles. Again, this is an energy of appraisal. It's an energy, let me take a moment and really look at what's going here. Let me assess the situation. The hangman. It's not in motion yet, but I do feel strongly there is something where we are going to see in the coming months a more vocal and a more active approach to counteract the idea that in order to be God-fearing, in order to be truly, aligned with your faith, if that's your Christian faith, that it does not equate to what we're hearing from the MAGAverse and people who are promoting the Project 2025. It's a tall order. It's a tall ask. We got the 4 of Pentacles there. See how tight that energy is? It's like, this is what I stand for. This is what I do. This is what I know. It's gonna be a tall order. There will be some resistance back and forth, but as long as people are made to feel the 2 of Pentacles, thank you. That's partnership. There has to be, I think, these church leaders that are coming, who are more open, who are more accepting, who are more tolerant, whose congregations and philosophies embody teachings around biblical teachings that are around more love focused, more open, and more adaptable. They are going to, but there's a fear around it as well, because they understand that to do so, they're going to be open to attack, or even open to the idea that they are in fact being, it's sort of like heretics, right? We have the Tower. It's going to be a shock value, and it's really going to mean that they've got to be courageous in knowing that what is at stake is greater than any fear. The people who are coming out and attending these rallies and throwing their everything behind Trump, to the extent, even going back to how I opened this taping with the Jan 6 rioters, who lined up and just, went all in on behalf of something that, without even considering the ramifications, that history being that teacher, these leaders, these not conservative, these more open-minded leaders, of faith leaders that are going to come forward, they're going to do it having taken the time to understand what it is that they're truly up against, and to understand that when they do this, when they speak out, it can't just be from the political perspective. It can't just be from social justice, from racial justice, from women's rights, from all sorts of, from tolerance, from the idea that if love truly is the premise of, you know, the church and faith, that there are other ways to operate in that love that should not be threatening, that should not be that should not dismantle democracy. And I have the Two of Swords. Yeah, it's in the planning stages, and there are just, I think what I'm getting there, those twos. We saw that Two of Pentacles as well. Those are decisions that either or, this and that, us and them. There are different ways to go about it, and it's a question of how do we get the most buy-in or the most cooperation without that turning into another fight. All right. So we'll see what happens with that. Keep your eyes out for that. If you know of organizations or you see stories around that, but I do think we're going to see religious leaders come out more and more. I know that there have been it's so easy for certain factions of Trump's camp to really rely on that following, because they have shown that they're willing to be tried and true. The faith, the far right Christian nationals, and who have now been deemed as the MAGAverse. But I think the MAGAverse is going to disintegrate slowly but surely. And what's also interesting, Spirit just gave me, is pay attention to that term. It's become a very convenient hype term in media, but what's interesting is that term, while it may have been prompted by a lot of things that are happening around Donald Trump, and since 2016 and before and onward, certainly since then, even when he's out of the picture, the MAGAverse, the principles of this MAGAverse that's been created are still there. And that's where the deprogramming really is going to be. Seven of Swords. People are going to realize they've been lied to. They've been hoodwinked. They've been sold a bill of goods that ultimately was never true. It was about control, not about freedom, not about liberty, and not about a holy life versus a good life. And it will come to an end. I've got the world. It will come to an end. It will have to disintegrate. But Spirit is saying it's going to have to disintegrate because the MAGAverse is going to begin to be addressed separate and apart from Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the catalyst. But the virus that is spread in this MAGAverse, gotta get some medicine for that. And that'd be really interesting to see who it is that's going to step forth in the coming months. If any of you get hits, and certainly as I get more hits around that, I'll share it with you. So, all right, you all, that's what I got for today. Let's see what's coming up in the latest on the Trump jury in New York. Let's also see, I don't want to close out. Spirit just said don't close out without this. So, the $175 million bond in the Tish James case. We know that, it was like all of a sudden this night company, what's his name, Banner something with the weird guy, billionaire Twisted, right? For entertainment purposes only. So Tish James and company were like, hold up. You can't just submit this, we're going to take your word for it that you have this $175 million. So we find out today, they filed papers late Monday. I'm taping this on Tuesday the 16th. They filed papers, Trump's team filed papers saying, we got the 175. We told you we had it. Here's the proof. This night company, KNIC, is LA based. They've got it. They're flush. Take our word for it. And the bond, it is secured. We're on the hook for Trump because Trump has now signed over 175 and some change assets in a Charles Schwab account. And there have been some legal eagles out there who are like, wait a minute. That's not making sense. If you had the 175 million already set up in a Charles Schwab account, then why didn't you just put that up? How did this banner guy or whatever his name is, how did he even get this night specialty company out of LA? How did they even get involved? How did they get involved, right? So I'm going to take a look at that and see how far that's going to go. Because I'm wondering if the whole thing was Tish James and the court and Gorin said, look, you got to show us proof. We can't just take your word for it. You're an out-of-state bonding company. You're not even licensed to issue bonds in the state of New York. So we need to see some proof that this money actually exists, because otherwise, you know, Tish James can go ahead and start getting, you know, taking some steps to get that money to exercise on that judgment, that $450 some odd million judgment. Is this the end of it, or is it going to keep? There's the Nine of Pentacles, so that's them saying, don't worry, we have it. The Emperor again, that's, you know who, DJT, feeling like, aha, job well done. We've satisfied the requirement. We've shown that we do, and I do in fact have that 175 million. But there's the World. So is that the end of it? Is that going to hold? Is that those filings of those papers saying between the Charles Schwab account, is that going to hold fast? Hold off exercising James's ability to exercise on the judgment. Seven of Wands. And the Two of Wands. It's going to hold off on, I think what Spirit is saying here, you all, it's going to hold off on Tish James's ability to go ahead and exercise on the judgment. They can't kick it out because at the end of the day, they did provide, quote unquote, the proof that was required. They filed the documents within the time frame that they had been given. But there's something there. That Seven of Wands feels like there's something there where it's something fishy, as I saw one person, a couple of people said in the news today. There's something fishy about this. It doesn't add up. If you had that money in a Charles Schwab account, why didn't you just put that money up? Versus now you've supposedly signed over your rights to that money to this other night specialty company in order for them to put up the bond. Now you got to pay more money. There's fees, etc. involved in that. There's something more coming on that, you all. But for the time being, it was sufficient to stop Tish James from being able to actually begin to collect on that judgment attached to his properties, etc., etc. So yeah, delay. That's what's happening here. There's a delay, but I don't think that issue has gone away just yet. All right, you all? Okay, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon.